Hey guys, welcome back. So today's video I am super excited about because not only am I getting to do yet another true crime get ready with me, but today's case is super interesting because it actually happened in my town that I live in, which is crazy because like bad things don't happen here. Like it's a very small, quiet town where like the worst thing that happens is like kids get busted with weed. So yeah, I find it super like crazy that a serial killer lived here. Granted, she wasn't like the craziest of serial killers, but like the woman herself was like batshit crazy. So anyways, let's just go ahead and get started. As usual, all the products I use are listed down below because, you know, we're talking about true crime. I'm not going to interrupt her makeup. So today's case is on Judy Buenoano. I don't know if I'm technically saying that right, but it's how I say it, so we're just gonna roll with it. She was born in a small town in Texas in 1943, and she was actually born Judy Welty. That was her name. Her life was not the greatest, honestly. Her mom died when she was either 2 or 4. I couldn't narrow that down too much. There were a bunch of different articles that some said 2, some said 4. So sometime in her very early years, her mother died. And her baby brother were sent to live with their grandparents by their father. However, her 2 older siblings were actually put into foster care because I guess the grandparents couldn't take all 4. I don't really know. So that kind of sucks. She like immediately lost half of her family. And her father remarried and moved to New Mexico, at which point her and her brother Robert were sent to live with him. What am I doing? So when she got there, she says that she was physically and emotionally abused pretty much from the start. And that continued on for years until she was 14, at which point she ended up actually attacking her stepmother and her stepbrothers, pretty brutally actually. She threw hot oil on her brothers and pretty much just started beating the crap out of her stepmother. So she was arrested and sent to prison for 2 months, at which point the judge, when she was getting out, gave her the option of either going back to her parents or going to a reform school. And she chose reform school. So the judge sent her to reform school and she stayed there until she was 18. So she graduated from reform school when she was 18 years old, and she went on to become a nursing assistant. And it was around this time that she actually became pregnant with an unknown man. We never find out the father, although there were some reports that he was a officer at a nearby military base. Those claims are kind of unsubstantiated. So she ends up giving birth to her first son, Michael, and it's around this time that she meets the man who becomes her first husband, who's an Air Force sergeant. His name was James Goodyear. And he was all around a pretty good guy. There were no reports of him hurting her, being mean to her. He made good money, so she had nothing to complain about there. And it seemed like they had a pretty good life. They actually got married in 1962, and James actually adopted Michael as kind of like a celebration for their marriage. And then the couple went on to have 2 more children, James Jr. and Kimberly. Kimberly was actually born in Orlando, where they became stationed after they got married. So the family was having, you know, pretty much the dream at the moment. However, in 1971, things started quickly going downhill for the family. James Goodyear Sr. comes back from being deployed in Vietnam, and he's pretty much immediately admitted to the hospital. He gets admitted to the U.S. Naval Hospital there in Orlando, and the doctors are pretty dumbfounded. He's showing some very odd symptoms. They don't really know what it is. Their best guess is that he picked up something in Vietnam. So they treat him the best they can, but he ends up dying in September of 1971 from pretty much unknown causes, basically. And it's not even 5 days later before Judy cashes in 3 life insurance policies on James. So after James dies, she decides she's ready for a change. She wants to move the family. And just as they're getting ready to move, their home in Orlando actually goes up in flames and completely burns down in basically a freak accident. And she ends up collecting about $90,000 in insurance money. And this is in 1971, so I actually looked it up, and $90,000 in 1971 would be about $500,000 in today's money. So she got a buttload of money just from this house burning down. So this is when she moves her family to the Pensacola area, which, if you're not familiar, is in North Florida. We're right there on the Panhandle. So she moves her family to the Pensacola area. I think she technically settles in the Milton area. And it's not even a year later that she has a new lover. So 1972 finds her living with a man named Bobby Joe Morris, which Bobby Joe is just like a very Milton name. So I find it mildly amusing, but it's whatever. So it's at this point that Michael is becoming a problem child. He is very angry, violent. He's not doing great at school. He's actually failing IQ tests to the point where nowadays we would probably call him, mentally slow or some sort of verbiage in that way. But this was the 70s, and they didn't really use those types of verbiage. They didn't really understand that, so he was basically just a problem child that they didn't really know what to do with. And I guess Judy understood that he needed help that she couldn't provide for him. He could no longer go to the VA hospital because James had died, so they didn't get any benefits that way, and I guess they didn't really have health insurance. So she offers Michael up to foster care with the condition that he receives mental health care to try and help him with some of his issues, I guess, which for anybody else would probably be considered, a good motherly act, but I don't know, knowing this woman, I think it was more of a selfish thing to, get rid of him because he was causing her so much issues, but that's neither here nor there. So she offered him up in 1974, but in 1977, Bobby Joe actually decides he wants to move to Colorado, so he offers to take Judy and her children with him. So they've been together for a long time now, 6 years? 5 years? But they aren't married, which I don't know what the, social taboos on that are, but they've been together for a really long time, and Judy ends up taking Michael out of the foster care system, packs up her kids, and is getting ready to move out to Colorado when her home in Pensacola goes up in flames. So she collects even more insurance on that house and moves out to Colorado. And at this point, she actually ends up changing her name to Judy Morris. Even though, like I said, they weren't married, so I don't really know why she took his name, but she did. Only a year after they're there, Bobby Joe actually gets admitted to the hospital where they live, and he's showing, again, very odd symptoms that the doctors don't really know what to do with. They're not really sure what it is. So they treat him the best they can, and they actually release him back into Judy's custody, where he eventually dies in January of 1978. It was actually January 28th, 1978. And by February 4th, she actually goes and redeems 3 life insurance policies that she had on Bobby Joe. So less than a week later, she cashes in 3 more life insurance policies on her boyfriend. And his official cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest. In May, Judy actually changes her name and her children's last name to Buenoano, which is kind of an odd thing. It's kind of creepy, actually. Buenoano actually means good year in Spanish, which, if you remember, her first husband's name was Goodyear. So it's kind of like a sweet yet creepy homage to her first husband. So that's just an odd little tidbit there for you. And then in June of 1978, she moves her family back to the Pensacola area, and she ends up settling in the Gulf Breeze town, which, super small town, super quiet, things don't really happen here, right? And it's at this point that Judy is very wealthy. She has cashed in 6 life insurance policies and 2 homeowners policies on these people and houses that are just dropping like flies, honestly. She buys a brand new home in the area. She has a red Corvette. She even opens a nail salon named, wait for it, Fingers and Faces. Fingers and Faces is what she names her nail salon, which I googled it, and it's a fairly common nail salon name, but like, coming from a serial killer, it's a little creepy. However, it's also at this time that Michael is getting much worse. He's getting angrier. He's having even more issues in school, and he actually ends up dropping out of high school in his sophomore year. And he joins the Army. So after training, he's actually officially stationed in Georgia, and he figures on the way to Georgia, he will stop by his mom's house and spend some time with her before, not seeing her for a couple of months. However, by the time he makes it to his base in November of 1979, he's almost immediately admitted to the base hospital. And doctors officially diagnose him with metal poisoning, and they do some tests, and they actually find that he has outrageous levels of arsenic in his system, about 7 times the normal level of arsenic in human bodies. So they find that super weird, as pretty much anybody would, but they treat him the best they can. However, after 6 weeks of care, his muscles have completely deteriorated in both his arms and his legs, and he basically becomes a quadriplegic. They fit him with 60 pounds of metal braces. One of his arms he actually loses and becomes a prosthetic. It's not a great time for him, so he's actually discharged into his mother's care, and he moves back home. So this would have been about late December, early January of 1979. However, in May of 1980, specifically May 13th, Judy decides to take Michael and her younger son James out canoeing, which is a fairly common activity in this area. We have like a river that people go like canoeing and tubing and all that stuff, and it's super fun. But I don't think I would take my son that's covered in 60 pounds of metal braces to go canoeing, and in a situation that James later calls specifically, and I quote, a scuffle with a snake that got pulled into the boat by the fishing line. The boat ends up capsizing, and unfortunately, Michael sinks. He drowns to death because he's got 60 pounds of metal braces on him, basically. So when the police and the press show up, they pretty much all blindly accept her and James's account of this tragic accident that no one could have expected and blah, blah, blah. And they kind of just accept her word. And I think part of the reason why they accepted her word so blindly is actually because she passed herself off as Dr. Judy Buenoano, who apparently worked out of Fort Walton Beach and was, you know, this loving mother who just wanted to show her poor son a good day. And nobody really questioned her on the fact that, you know, you're not a doctor, but that's fine. So they all blindly accept her and they move on. However, the Army didn't accept this idea that this was just a tragic accident, and they actually launched their own investigation. However, they still end up paying out Michael's life insurance policy to her, so she ends up collecting another $20,000 just on Michael. It wasn't until local officials uncovered the fact that Judy actually had 2 civilian life insurance policies on Michael that they became a little suspicious of her, but nothing really happened following that. And Judy moves on from this tragic accident by finding herself a new lover. So this man's name was John Gentry. He was a local businessman that was very revered, honestly. And she decides to roll with this I'm a doctor idea. She actually completely fabricates an entire healthcare career for this man. She tells him that she has a PhD in biochemistry as well as psychology. She tells him that she went to nursing school, that she was the head nurse for a local hospital. And of course, Gentry soaked it all up. He had no reason to think that she was lying. So he believed it line and sinker, and he actually showers her with extravagant gifts, expensive gifts. He took her on really expensive Caribbean cruises. Like, he was just showing her the time of her life, basically. So, you know, clearly she was just racked with guilt and grief from her son dying. And it was in October of 1982 when John and Judy actually agreed to purchase life insurance policies on each other. I find this situation slightly odd because, like, why would you buy life insurance policies on each other when you're not even married? However, of course, because Judy is Judy, she actually goes behind John's back and changes his policy from $50,000 to $500,000. So quite a big jump there, and she actually pays the added premiums out of her own pocket to keep him in the dark. And it was around this time that she also starts giving John these special vitamins that she found and came across in her, you know, miraculous healthcare career. And by December of 1982, so just a few months later, John is hospitalized for stomach pains, throwing up, very just odd symptoms, again, that doctors don't really know what to do with. And he did seem to notice that the symptoms started to go away when he stopped taking the vitamins because he was in the hospital for a while. But this didn't seem suspicious enough for him to rake it off with Judy. So this brings us to June of 1983. Judy has just told John that she is pregnant with his child, and they're very excited for this new life that they're bringing into the world. So John heads out to buy a bottle of champagne so they can celebrate, but he never makes it to the liquor store because when he gets in his car, it explodes. Officials find a car bomb, a homemade car bomb that was attached to his brake lights, so it wouldn't go off until nighttime when his brake lights would come on, and then it would explode. Miraculously, he is only seriously injured, and he is taken to the local hospital where surgeons actually are able to save his life. I read in a book that was written about this situation that he was actually pretty much saved by his sunroof, because I guess he had it open, so he was kind of like projected through the sunroof rather than trapped in the car when it exploded. And while he's in hospital, police get the chance to talk to him and uncover some very suspicious things. So they find out that, of course, Judy upped John's life insurance policy, which they find super suspicious. They find out that she was actually surgically sterilized in 1975, so there is no way that she was pregnant. They also uncover that Judy had been telling her friends that John had a serious illness since November of 1982, before she even started giving him those vitamins. And they uncovered that she had actually recently purchased a around-the-world cruise for herself and James Jr. and Kimberly, but not for John. Now, this around-the-world cruise literally would have taken them all over the world, and they would have been gone for months. A very long time, so pretty much long enough for them to get out of Dodge, basically. And so the police are very suspicious of her at this point. Analysis of the vitamins that she had been giving him, and they actually found that they contained a chemical called paraformaldehyde, which was actually a very common chemical used to sterilize salon tools, which of course Judy owned a salon, so that made sense. In July, police actually raided her home and found the same type of wire that was used in the making of the car bomb. And they used phone records to connect her to a man that basically connected people to buying dynamite. Like he kind of like, people would go to him and be like, hey, I need some dynamite. And he'd be like, all right, go to this dude. So they connected her phone records to that man. And during this raid, they also found an illegal gun and some marijuana in James Jr.'s room. So he got arrested, but that's just a separate charge. So January 11th, 1984, Judy is actually indicted on first-degree murder in the death of her son, Michael. James Jr. does not get indicted on this, even though he was looked at for it. They thought he was suspicious because he happened to, be there. They did not end up charging him in the end. Authorities also end up exhuming the bodies of Bobby Joe and James Goodyear and find evidence on both bodies of arsenic poisoning. So they pretty much conclusively realize she killed both of them. March 22nd, Judy is found guilty of murdering Michael and sentenced to life imprisonment without the option of parole for 25 years. So she would have to be in prison for 25 years before she could even consider parole. And then October 15th, Judy is indicted for another 15 years on the attempted murder of John Gentry. Now, like I said in the beginning, she was a very revered pillar in this community, basically. People loved her. And she had some pretty powerful friends, and she had a very well-known, very popular, very good at his job lawyer that was standing beside her. He actually put up his own house as her bail collateral to get her out of prison, and he was fighting for her every step of the way. He never believed that she did this, but of course she did get indicted on all of her murders. And then on November 16th, she is indicted for the second-degree murder of her husband, James Goodyear, and she is actually sentenced to death for this murder. Now, of course, because Bobby Joe actually died in Colorado, they couldn't charge her for that murder. However, Colorado was kind of waiting in the stands to see if they would get their chance with her. However, they did not, because she was sentenced to death in Florida. And March 30th, 1998, 2008. She was executed at the age of 54. An interesting piece of information on her is she was actually the first woman to be executed in the state of Florida since 1848, and she was only the third to be executed in the entire country since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. So, I mean, we all know women killers are very rare, but I just thought that was super interesting that, like, she was one of the first women to be executed in Florida and in the country since it was reinstated. So Judy Buenoano was officially dubbed the Black Widow Killer. There are tons of articles written about her. She has a couple of books written about her, which you can find on Google Documents if you're like super curious about her story even more. This is one of those stories that always stuck with me. She was actually one of the first serial killers that I ever heard about, just because, you know, she did all this in the town that I'm from, so my parents talked about her. She actually knew, like, my mom and my aunt actually knew her and, like, had multiple interactions with her, so I guess you could say that, like, my family knows a serial killer. So I always kind of heard about her, and this is one of the first stories that really stuck with me, because, like, I find it fascinating. Like, this woman was batshit crazy, basically. So that is the story of Judy Buenoano. I hope you guys liked today's True Crime Get Ready with me. Let me know down below if there's any other cases you want me to cover. But other than that, I hope you guys will stick around, maybe hit that subscribe button, and check out some of my other videos. And I'll catch you in my next one. Bye!